Welcome. This is ENG 328, Study Session 5. Wole Soyinka, Myth, Indictment, and Liberation. Introduction. Akinwande Oluwole Soyinka was born to Yoruba parents on 13th July 1934 in Ijebu, Isara, Western Nigeria. He received his education at Abeokuta, Ibadan, and Leeds in Great Britain. He is the first Black African to win international fame and the first Black African to win Nobel Prize in Literature, 1986. He is an innovative poet, a demanding critic, and editor. His poetic works reflect African realities at pre-colonial and post-colonial levels. This study session introduces you to his works. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to identify the myths in which Idonre and other poems is founded. Locate the face of Nigerians' history around which a shuttle in the crypt is thematically woven. Highlight the Pan-African cause to which Ogun Abibiman is committed. Analysis of Wole Soyinka's poetry. Idonre and selected poems. Wole Soyinka's multifarious identities are, however, tributaries of a single stream, fed by the distinctive currents of his Yoruba culture. One must never try to rigidify the divisions between one experience and another. All experiences to flow into one another, he has insisted, 1973, Ditus 42. Soyinka's poetry has been said to be notorious for its clothed syntax and naughty grammar, its tortured diction and other overloaded metaphors, most especially for its tendencies to subsume human emotions and experience into mythic archetypes. In Idonre and Other Poems, 1967, the 25-page epic title poem is a unique collective. Here, the reader needs to equipped with a full Yoruba mythological belief prior to an assault upon the text, and Soyinka's preface and notes are more confusing than illuminating. Idonre, which combines a mystical overnight experience on Mount Idonre with the mythology of Ogun's descent among men, is a magnificently jumbled, furiously inspirational piece written in a kind of cosmic delirium and full of intellectual loose and as a result of his crossing of different legends. Soyinka as a poet loves to celebrate the tribulations of experience rather than the joy of innocence. His tragic vision extends to the operations of natural phenomena. Likewise, his tragic imagination, as earlier posited, is linked to the tragic experience of his personal muse, Ogun, often appraised by Soyinka as the origin of the tragic spirit in Yoruba methodology and as the first tragic actor since the successful invasion of the dark, irrational forces that inhabit the Gulf of Transition. Soyinka seems to have had certain epiphany, calling him to fulfill a vocation in the manner of Okigbo's response to Idoto, the river goddess. He dramatizes experience thus: 3 years later, and some 200 miles away, a rainstorm rived apart the intervening years and space, leaving unresolved sensations of my first climb up Idanre. I abandoned my work. It was middle of the night, and walked. Idanre is a record of the walk through wet woods on the outskirts of Molete, a pilgrimage to Idanre in company of presences such as Dilate the Head and Erase Known Words, 1967 Ditto 3. Hence, Soyinka has turned himself into the priest of Ogun. Idanre's thunderous praises and flashing images convey a sense of tremendous scope and power, transcending its individual opacities, but the final effect is more high-sounding than meaningful, and the verses frequently collapse into incoherent esoteric verbiage. As a first builder, as a errant wheel of the death chariot, as a creation snake, spawned tail in mouth, wind chisels and rain pasts, rusts from steel and bones, wake dormant seeds and suspended lives, I heard the silence yield to substance, 1967 Ditto 65. Here, the various facets of experience collide at the very core of the initial stimulus. The favorite method in Idanre is to situate impacted images in a poise of action as seen above. The archetypal, elemental struggles of mythic forces were not informed by any humanizing perspective, and today the poem's chief value is a mine of images and motives. According to Obi Maduako, to an uninitiated reader, Soyinka's modernist technique is bound to be obstructionist. Roderick Wilson claims that it leads to complexity and fusion, and Chinwezu et al. Charge Soyinka with indulging in metaphysical obscurities for their own sake. Soyinka's poetry requires the same kind of mental alertness that we have been accustomed to focus on the poetry of Donne and that of a neo-metaphysician, Pound and Eliot. He resembles this in the dynamism of his mind, the resourcefulness of his intellect, and in the habit of yoking together heterogeneous ideas and concepts, 1986 Ditto 7 to 8. Against this backdrop, Soyinka's poetry, according to Emmanuel Ngara, fails also to appeal to the emotions, the imagination, or the intellect. It is much too abstract, all dry bones without any juice and no flesh. Such poetry, according to Ngara, does not speak to the reader or listener and cannot be classified as good poetry. 1990 Ditto 95. If heart has no appeal, it is not heart. Nonetheless, one cannot totally condemn the work of Soyinka, as Idanre marks a developmental stage of his poetics. His later poems collection, Ogun Abibima, 1976, is more developed in terms of socio-political consciousness and ideological thrust. A Shuttle in the Crypt. A Shuttle in the Crypt, 1972, is a collection supposed written as a response to the Nigerian crisis, Civil War, 1967 to 1970. According to Maduako, Soyinka was opposed to the war in principle. He condemned the massacre of the Igbos in the north and welcomed the January 1966 military coup as an event motivated by a genuine revolutionary zeal. When the war broke out, he tried without success to reconcile the two parties in the dispute, the federal government and the Igbo. The attempt failed, and for his activities in Biafra, Soyinka was imprisoned. The failure of the revolutionary objectives of the first coup and the third movement is lamented in two poems. 1990, Ditto 38. A Shuttle in the Crypt, Conversation at Night with a Cockroach, and What If Thus He Died. Sore Teeth, dribbling a caress of spittle on the wound, you nibbled trust from the heart of our concerted bond. 1972. The shuttle next recalls the victims of the massacres in northern Nigeria. Not human faces, hands, were those that fell upon us, nor was death withheld, even from children, from the unborn, and wombs were torn from living, and eyes of children taken out, all the point of knives and bayonets. In 1973. After the massacre, after the lament of the victims, the cockroach asked the last word. All was well. All was even as it was in the beginning. 1972. A Shuttle in the Crypt, 1972, is a bitter distillation of Soyinka's imprisonment, the testament of a poet driven to the brink of madness by the mind butchers of military power. It is the literature of survivor more functional than meaningful. Importantly, the shuttle of the title is a poet's imprisoned mind that shunts back and forth in its solitary confinement, first finding relief in the vexed criticism leveled at the federal regime, background and phrases, then liberating itself imaginatively into world literatures, using sheet technical execution as a disciple to hold itself together. 4 archetypes. And finally, as the landmarks of being subside and materials reality vanishes, relocating to the remote, mystic inner reaches of consciousness. Importantly, the archetypes are metaphors for the poet's destiny as the victims of injustice. Sometimes, an event in the Nigerian Civil War drama is provided with an analog from history or literature. According to Maduako, the use of archetypes as a poetic device has enabled the poet to address his readers directly through the voice of a personal. Furthermore, he universalizes his experience through that strategy, thereby using haze to signify the recurrent pattern of human stupidity. 1986, Ditto 44. Indeed, I was not Joseph, a cousin martyr. 1. No saints are saints not moved beyond event, their passive valor turned to time's slow unfolding, a time of evil's cries, renunciation of the sanity vision summons, instant hand of truth to tear all pained masks. The story of the first archetype is taken from the Bible. Joseph was a servant in the household of Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's security guards. His wife attempted to lure him to her bed, and when all her strategies failed, she accused Joseph of attempting to violate her honor. Joseph was immediately clamped into prison without trial. Likewise, Soyinka was locked up prior to trial like Joseph. However, the biblical Joseph resigned himself to faith, while Soyinka becomes a cursing martyr who renounces the saintly vision. All whose dreams of fire resolve in light wait upon the old ancestor in pursuit of truth and to interpret dreams. The biblical Joseph, as we know, was endowed with the gift of prophecy as the interpretation of dreams. The creative artist is also an interpreter of dreams. The second archetype is Hamlet, who belonged to the category of fainted Prometheans. In Soyinka aesthetic philosophy, Joseph sacrificed a sense of injustice to the saintly vision and Hamlet to his penchant for metaphysical speculations. The situation in Hamlet could only be applicable to Victor Banjo, the commander of the expeditionary forces of the Third Force, which invaded the Midwest in the early days of the war. Victor Banjo's Third Force failed to make a decisive sally into Lagos. The third archetype, Gulliver, portrays Soyinka's real alter ego. Gulliver was humane, long-suffering, law-abiding, and accommodating, but would never compromise his principles of justice. 1986 Dicto 45. The particular episode that brings out these qualities in Gulliver is Soyinka's role in the war between the Lilliputians and the Blefuscudians. I could not choose but serve. I took their measure in the depth of sea beds. Galleries slave to claims of bread and coal. I brought the enemy fleet to port and pressed a reasoned course of temperate victory. It did not suffice I pledged reversion of any strength. To arbitration, the pledged extinction of their kind. 1972. In chimes of silence, which represent the climax of the shuttle's personal purgatory in the abyss of the crypt, its organization according to Maduako, or its ritualistic and its basic metaphor, is one of the journey that is a rite of passage. The poem's ritual structure is a deliberate conceit for Soyinka, who views his incarcerations in the crypt as a reenactment of Ogun's trial in the abyss. When man is stripped of excrescence, when disaster and conflict have crushed and robbed him of self-consciousness and pretensions, he stands in present reality at the spiritual edge of this gulf. He has nothing left in physical existence which successfully impresses upon the spiritual or psychic perception. It is at such moments that transitional memory takes over and intimations rack in of that intense parallel of his progress through the gulf of transition, of the dissolution of his self, and his struggle and triumph over subsumation through the agency of the will. 1972. In chimes of silence, Soyinka works out his own salvation through the metaphor of a ritual journey. These technical devices have helped Soyinka to discipline the emotions and tighten his verse, while at the same time lending sophistication to the exploration of the emotions. A Shuttle in the Crypt is a poetry of private mystic revelation in extremis. Non-negotiable and often impenetrable, its searing vision cannot easily be transported back into the dimness of ordinary reality. Ogun Abibiman. Ogun Abibiman, 1976. Soyinka's next excursion into verse was a 22-page epic in which he combines a direct call to frontline states to take action against South African with a mythologized Menifee for its liberation, in which Ogun, Yoruba, god of war, forms forces in violent, mystical union with the legendary Zulu chieftain Shaka. Section 1 is devoted to Ogun's military preparation prior to the actual launching of the Great Offensive. Here, he laid aside his responsibilities as farmer and carver and becomes the technicians of the forge. In Section 2, Ogun's military intentions are approved by the great warlord of the world himself, Shaka, portrayed by Soyinka as Africa's most renowned nation builder and as a military and socio-organizational genius. Shaka readily associates himself with Ogun's military prowess and provides the reader with a most revealing attribute of the god. Felt the rain of sand as knife ends on my hairless head, and knew this thread of wooded rock hills, shredded mosts of Idori, the heart of furnaces and pulsing hull, clanging of anvils, fearsome rites of passage, harvesting and out of season, hermit's feet perfumed in earth, and dung of all Abibiman, shape of dread whose silence frames the awesome act of origin. I feel and know your tread as mine. 1972. Ogun Abibiman is a poetic of the public voice passionately committed, but curiously impersonal and unengaging, carrying no deep emotional conviction, although refreshingly lucid after Soyinka's earlier 2 volumes of poetry. Its first doggerel rhetoric is sadly lacking in the inner tensions that give the earlier lyrics their personal intensity and human resonance. As an African poet, well rooted in his Yoruba tradition, Soyinka infuses music and rhythm to a heroic and sublime pitch in Ogun Abibiman. Rògbòdìyàn, rògbòdìyàn. Turmoil, turmoil. Ogun relay Shaka. Ogun treads the heart of Shaka. Rògbòdìyàn, turmoil on the loose. Ogun gbọ́wọ́ Shaka. Ogun shakes the hand of Shaka. Ó di rògbòdìyàn, all is in turmoil. Ogun is commissioned by the most authoritative voice of revolution in the pre-colonial history of Southern Africa to carry the war of liberation to its logical end. In part 3, Soyinka returns to Shaka's war cry, Shigidi, which she translates as the song of the spear blade as it bites. I have eaten. The acceptance of the necessity for violence in the struggle for liberation of South Africa, according to Ngara. The poet and Groit rejects the claim of those who plead non-violence, and all non-violence is returned with violence. 1990, Ditto 100. With love survive the epitaph. Another Kafar gun saves us the sweat. Can love outrace the random bullet to possess the art of black despair? Soyinka ends the polemic on violence and non-violence with a reference of Yeats, the second coming. The second coming of Ogun and Shaka signals the end of hostilities and the extinction of white rule in Africa. Study session summary. To an uninitiated, Soyinka is an obstructionist, but Soyinka's poetry requires the same kind of alertness that is associated with the poetry of Donne, whom he resembles in the dynamic of his mind, the resourcefulness of his intellect, and in the habit of yoking together heterogeneous ideas, particularly in Idori and Shuttle. In Abibiman, Soyinka has created a minor epic which is direct relevance to the African predicament. This is the end of study session 5. Thanks for listening.